Thank you for being with us today. We are shooting the third episode of our series of open data in construction in the UK construction industry. This is a project funded by the BRE Trust in collaboration with Constructing Excellence G4C. And the Open Data Institute is also helping us find the interesting people to talk to. We have here today Stephen Baldrige from Barratt Homes and Ben Cave, Citadel on the Move, and we talk about housing. So why is housing important? It's kind of self-evident, really. We all need housing. You know, in Article 25 of the Human Rights Declaration, next to food and clothing, housing is the third thing we all need all across the world. And we are trying in the UK to supply the housing we need, but population is increasing quite rapidly, and we sometimes fear we're not going to be able to meet that demand. You know, we want to get into the problem of housing, explaining people following this series what the issue is, and at the same time want to get into open data and understand what open data is and how open data may provide interesting solutions to that problem. So I would like to, start from Stephen, and as I said, just let's try to break down what the issue is. Providing housing is a complex process. It starts from land. It has to go through planning. It needs to move from design to construction. And after being constructed, it has to be sold and then maintained. So it's an ongoing relationship with your customers, isn't it?
It is, yeah, as you say, which starts right from the beginning of that process. Most of our customers often kind of live in the communities that we're building in. So, as you say, right from that point, even through to selling and maintaining, they are involved in the process.
So let's start from the very beginning. So Barratt is one of the biggest and most established housing developers in the UK. I understand you develop all across the country, and I suppose the beginning of your game starts with a plot of land. Is that how it works?
Exactly that, yeah. So kind of our land, it can broadly be split into kind of two streams as to where it's sourced from. So we have the kind of the more oven ready type of site, which is kind of within the local plan identified as being to be developed for housing, and that kind of comes in typically kind of more small parcels, and that's kind of brought to our attention through a combination of local knowledge and land agents that have kind of knowledge of that and bring it to the table. And then we have kind of the more strategic sites, which is kind of the new towns type approach, much vaster parcels of land, which is our job to kind of, there's a lot more work kind of involved in that and kind of bringing that through to kind of ultimately getting planning permission for housing.
So what's the issue in finding land right now? What could be improved?
It's a good question, and being completely frank, I'm not the ideal person to answer that. That we've got excellent land guys in all the divisions, and it's probably a regional issue. Being frank, and the divisions that operate kind of in central London, it's obviously going to be constraints there. Kind of outside that, and in the green belt. There's obviously constraints. There's land there, but not kind of allocated for housing and protected. But I think there's a stream of land that comes through. Our land bank is healthy at the moment, which is good. But it's a challenge getting it through and then getting the planning permission on it in kind of a timely manner that once the land's identified, actually then starting delivering homes from it can be a lengthy process.
So is planning a collaboration process, or rather less fluid? So what are the hurdles for a better engagement with the planning and local authorities from your point of view?
We firmly believe that planning is a collaborative process, and it's collaborative with the local authority and with the local community. We do strong community engagement with every site that we're looking to develop. The last thing that we'd want to do is kind of be seen to just kind of be bulldozering our way into communities. We want to deliver homes where people want those homes to be built. So yeah, right from the outset, we have strong relationships with virtually all local authorities, at this divisional level, and kind of by engaging them in the process early on, does kind of streamline it as much as we can. But there's obviously a time lag in the process, kind of inherently.
Right. And so is participation and engagement in the local community something that we could, work on in a better way? Have you noticed in the recent years an improvement in the way you engage with local community through, IT or?
100% there's been an improvement in the way that we engage. More often than not, it's in kind of the tried and trusted manner of the local village hall. Go and be open, honest. These are our intentions. This is what we're looking to do. This is how we've tried to kind of minimise the impact. This is how we've tried to integrate this new site with the existing community, and that tends to be typically how we do it. There are some instances where the use of technology has been taken advantage of, but they're few and far between, being honest.
Right. So we found a piece of land. We went through the hopefully collaborative process of planning, engage with the local community. So we all know we want that new housing estate to be built, and now we go on site. What are the issues you're now facing on site?
What we effectively do is by bringing a kind of a site to a community is we start a temporary manufacturing facility in a residential environment. So we have a lot of issues around kind of making sure that the impact during construction is minimised, and that we're kind of a considerate neighbour during those phases. Our site managers are fantastic at kind of liaising with the community and being kind of approachable, and for the local community to feel able that they can come and say, this isn't quite working for us, kind of thing. So we do a lot of work on kind of restricting the times that deliveries can be made to site and things like that. So from the community side, I'd say that they're the main issues that we face, and then obviously there's many kind of technical issues and build issues that have to be faced throughout the process as well.
And we went through a period of economic recession where a huge amount of skills kind of left the industry. And as the economy is picking up again, we find that those people are not coming back. Either they found other jobs, or we failed in retaining them. So you were mentioning earlier, we have a skills shortage, haven't we?
We do, definitely. I mean, it's we can kind of see the trends in kind of the numbers of people that we employ, through our subcontractors. And how many we need to deliver the number of homes that we want to be delivering as a business. So we're currently delivering around 15,000 homes a year. We want to be delivering around 20,000 by 2020, and the serious concern that there's not the people out there that's needed to do that. So as you say, there's people did leave the industry, and some of them are coming back, but the concern is that not all of them. The other concern is that it's an ageing skill base as well. And the concern is that if an older leader of a group of bricklayers, gang of bricklayers, if he doesn't come back, also the young guys that he had working with him don't come back. And they were kind of future kind of managers that were going to have gangs underneath them as well. So there is serious concern on that. It's you see it in the labour rates. So because there's a shortage, the competition for that labour is fierce, and it gets costly sourcing that labour for ourselves as opposed to our competition, and that's kind of one of the areas that we haven't really had to compete with our competitors in the last few years, but we compete for labour now. So
there's maybe something that we could work on ensuring better knowledge transfer in skills. I just want to get to the end of this little build a house journey. So eventually we managed to find some good skills and adequate labour on site, and we built our home. How do we engage with our buyers that eventually become our community right now?
I would say this is where we are a bit more technologically astute. Astute, if that's the right word. And so we do have good use of we've got some great websites that we use to engage, social media. We do look to kind of get the communication out there, but then we do have the tried and trusted methods again of kind of, of hoardings, flags, show homes, people drive past, and that's kind of how we look to kind of, get people in. And then once they're in, we look to kind of, impress them with the quality of our build, the design of our build, the spaces that we can give them, and try and attract them that way.
But it becomes harder once a transaction has been complete to maintain an ongoing relationship, with your buyers. They become the owners. They quite rightly want to kind of protect their privacy, and it becomes harder to know more about the way they use the asset that you provided. So maybe there's something that could be improved in creating a longer relationship that might be beneficial for both parties. On that note, I will hold it there. So we started from land, we went into planning, through the risk of planning, into the risk of construction, and eventually in the opportunity for better engagement with your customers, really, your communities. I would hold it there for a second and start talking about open data. And as I was mentioning earlier, the purpose of this project, funded by the BRE Trust, is to increase the level of literacy around open data. In other words, talk about it. In other words, explain what the opportunity is. And I think the first fundamental step is to ask someone like Ben, who knows about this, what is open data?
Well, it's an excellent question, and one which is all too often not well understood. We start with the premise that open data is any information maintained by any source. That could be government, it could be industry, it could be third sector, or just a concerned individual, which is made freely available and accessible to the public at large to use and reuse as they see fit. So at its most simple, this is any kind of information, whether textual or numbers or facts and figures, that is made open and accessible to the public at large. Open data has become the subject of a number of different interpretations based on industry, based on where you stand in the process. And sometimes these can cloud the waters of what we understand by open data. But at its fundamental level, just any information freely available to the general public to use.
And do we need the government to give us the data, or can we find that open data elsewhere?
This is another common misconception, which is that open data comes solely from government. Now, what has been the case in the past is that open data from government has the strongest reason to be released, i.e. we pay our taxes, so give us the data we paid for, which has meant that government, particularly central government, has taken a lead in releasing open data. But in recent years, we've seen that industry and the third sector are also coming on board. They're realizing that their data has a fundamental value and a power which can only be unlocked by opening it up to the general public and to public view.
Fantastic. Okay, so we know that the construction industry is collecting quite a bit of data, and we, working together to understand what we could do with it. I think part of the issue is not knowing what the opportunities are, and there is somehow a risk of being held back by the level of IT skills required to understand open data. Now, I know Citadel on the Move has done some great work on standardizing the format of open data and also creating templates for apps to be developed by anyone almost. So I think that's a very interesting story to share. What is Citadel on the Move?
Well, Citadel on the Move was established, it's a European Commission-backed project started by a number of interested parties in different countries across Europe, which is designed to make open data a simple and fundamentally accessible reality for governments, businesses, and indeed citizens across Europe. So we start with the premise that open data can no longer be the sole preserve of technically minded, IT skilled people. It needs to be out there in the general domain, accessible to all so that its benefits can be widely realized. So we start from three basic premises. Number one, open data needs to be fully understood. Number two, it needs to be simple to open and put out there. And number three, it needs to be useful. Now, we went about this by firstly standardizing the formats for open data, because there's no way to do something widely until you understand how it should be done. And a good example of that would be the Building Information Management Task Force. I think many of your viewers may recognise the work that's done in the UK over the past years in standardising the way the construction industry collects and shares data between the different parties in the supply chain. And doing the same thing for open data, ensuring that there's a standard approach which you can give to anyone and they can follow, is very important to breaking down the barriers to use. And the other side of that is ensuring that the data is well used once it's open. A spreadsheet somewhere on a website is not going to float the boats of most ordinary people. It's not going to get very much used, because that's not the way we understand the world. We understand it through our smartphones, through our computers, through our TVs. So it's about making data useful. And for that, we built a simple application generator and a series of template applications which take any open data set in the Citadel format and instantly turn it into a mapping app that you can use, that you can see, that you can begin to explore and play with.
And I understand it's that easy that even a child could do it.
In fact, we ran a competition for Citadel on the Move back in 2014, the early part thereof, in which we challenged developers from around the world to build applications using Citadel, which had data on more than 2 continents. Now, our competition was won by 2 great kids, 8 and 9 years old, from the west coast of the United States, who built an application called At Me on the Move, which used data from the US, from Europe, and from South Africa to create an app that worked in 3 continents. They did this in probably a couple of hours, all told, from starting to think about their application to having the finished product ready to go. And the fact that this system is so simple that even children can begin to experiment and play and explore this open data is a really powerful message to industry, to government, that they need to think about how it's being reused and make it welcoming, get people into the process.
I think that's a fantastic story to start our brainstorming session. And just for my own clarity, data mapping seems to be the easiest door into open data. Mm-hmm. So I have a different amount of variety, of diversity of data. Mm-hmm. I can mash them all up onto a GIS, onto a map, mm-hmm. really. And with that, I can just make it clear for everyone to understand what's out there. And I think starting from what's out there could be a valuable starting point for helping the housing industry.
Absolutely. I mean, we found that mapping is something which is fundamental and universal. And particularly when we come to talk about the construction industry, people understand the construction industry and the built environment in terms of the space around them. So a map is a natural starting point for collecting what is often quite diverse and different data and putting it onto a single playing field. So using maps, it's possible to get a whole range of information about the local area out there to citizens and to begin a conversation with them about how a construction project is going to affect their local area. Great example of this from someone we've engaged with a lot in the Citadel project, which is Sedgemoor Council down in Somerset. Now, the council down there is building a large nuclear power station, which is having some profound impacts on the local community in terms of people, in terms of noise, in terms of what the environment will look like. And Sedgemoor took the step of opening up all that data on a map for local residents so that they can begin to understand how exactly the nuclear power station project is going to affect their local area. And the results were that it demystified it for people. People were no longer confused. They were no longer having to sit on the phone for hours simply to find out information about how their local road was affected, for example, or how many new people were going to be in the town. They could get all that information quickly and easily. And Paul Davidson, one of our associates down there in Sedgemoor, has told us that it made the process immensely easier, both for the council and for local residents, to get this through and to build a shared understanding around that data.
That's a fantastic story, and we start to experience and notice that when large developers start to act on the city and push urban regeneration particularly forward, the notion of social value has gained so much traction and relevance that even the private sector, starts to kind of think as a public entity almost. So the overall quality of the urban environment is not only a result from the kind of public agenda, so what the council is doing about it, but is also as a result, it comes as a result of the private developer interest. If a city, as part of the city, is working well, the value of land will go up, and it will be a more thriving community, and things will be cheaper and more valuable. So what I will try to kind of start now is to go back to that sequence of steps in supplying housing, and see how if we had a very bright US West Coast child with us today, what would he do if he could have access to Barrett's data sets? So we started from mentioning the diversity and intricacies in finding land across the UK. We have better mapping from some parts of the UK and potentially untapped pockets of growth elsewhere. And the problem sometimes is that we don't know about it. We don't know that actually there is a fantastic new transport link which the public sector has been paying for. They could unlock this new connection back in town. So what could we do? What sort of data set could we play with in improving the land market and improving the way we find opportunity for housing development? And this is not being prepared is really as a result of our collective thinking.
We're all ears, Ben.
Okay.
How can you help us? How can you help us find land?
Well, I would say that there's a couple of areas in which the open data agenda has the potential to help power the search for land. The first is around just who's out there. Who wants to live in a local area, and what kind of housing demand are they after? So it may be that when you've identified a parcel of land, something which you think maybe this could be good for building, you have the opportunity to find out, what does the local area look like in terms of people? What are their wants and needs? It may be that your local area contains a lot of young people who are potential first-time buyers, would be looking maybe for smaller units in larger volume, something which they can get into at an affordable price. Or it may be that you have a more affluent area, people looking perhaps to upsize, growing families. And just having that information gives you a great deal more quality on your land data. The other side of that is around starting a conversation with the community through data. So it's about going out there to communities, using open data to say, well, listen, we were thinking about this piece of land. How would you feel about a development? Because often you can get quite valuable insights from people on the grounds, the people who, as you say, like your sales managers, know the area really well. And they can provide you with additional information that lets you make more informed choices about where to look for land, what kind of land, and how it should be developed.
I think that the opportunity behind this, early start in the local community engagement is not only to have your market research refined, but also to create the community before the community. So start creating a sense of ownership of the future housing estate, even before that gets under the way. And I think that we all rely on fantastically accurate consultancy work, but actually knowing from the source and also establishing an ongoing relationship, an ongoing dialogue could be really bridging the gap between forecast and reality.
Yeah, I could definitely see the value in kind of what you're saying there. I mean, kind of our sales website will capture a lot of data, what people are inquiring, what are they after, and obviously and where are they from when they're doing that. So I'm wondering if that's kind of a potential avenue that might kind of be a start to that conversation.
Well, absolutely. This kind of data, which is immensely valuable, some of it needs to be protected for privacy reasons, but if it was anonymized, if it was generalized, there's information there which you can put out there to the public, to developers, and which you can get back really sort of added value results for your industry that make life easier for you. So it may be that an interested person, maybe a developer, maybe someone in the local community, has a look and says, we can see that people in this part of the country are desperate for this sort of housing unit. It just gives Barrett the sort of the extra information it needs to go away and think about new options, new choices for identifying land and for then using that land to its maximum impact.
And once you have the data, once you have that real-time result for this kind of market testing, which it sounds not that nice if you call it market testing, really, is the result of this conversation which is ongoing. You can then use the result of that ongoing dialogue and start possibly a different conversation with your planning partner, because you suddenly are the interpreter of a collective desire. You're not only trying to, of course, you're making your profit, but you come from a shared process that has already created a community behind it. So that, I think, moving from land to planning, there could be another interesting, place to start in using open data for housing developments. What do you think about this?
I know that anything kind of, it's a concern of the business, the planning process and the risk involved with that, and anything that can kind of, help facilitate that, reduce the risk, add kind of credence to the planning application is something that we'd be interested in.
And I mean, one of the areas where open data and the conversation you can start around data can really help here is engaging with the community about prospective planning applications before they happen. If you're able to start a conversation with the local community and they say, actually, this parcel of land, we'd love some houses to be built there, and this one maybe we're more split on, or it needs this kind of development, then when you come to the application stage, you've got that extra level of weight to go to the planning authorities with to say, hey, people in the local community are telling us we really want this kind of housing. Isn't that a good reason why we should streamline this process, get it through faster, and make the best choices that sort of match the demands of the local community?
That could be definitely something interesting to do. And then once you can collect all these pockets of evidence, you can actually start building a nationwide map of people's desires, and actually realise that what you're supplying is quite good, but it could just be implemented significantly by matching the profile of the demand out there. So that's kind of interesting, and then there's definitely something that can be done there. The next one up, which is the big topic, everyone is talking about this in the construction industry, is the skills shortage. The government and the industry shared construction industry strategy report issued last year. Makes it very clear. We have an aging workforce. We don't have the required replacement, and our modern method of construction are not quite developed enough to fill that gap. So I'm very, very interested now in how open data could help take the best of knowledge we already have and make sure it doesn't get lost.
Start with the expert.
Well, I agree, Antonio. I agree completely with what you're saying. We've had the discussion around, there is concern over how we're going to build the houses. My open data knowledge is obviously is nothing compared to Ben's. I'm trying to think, from this starter position. We do some partnership works with kind of colleges that are looking to kind of to bring new people into the system, and I assume that they'd have data that would be of value to us in terms of identifying where these people are that are bringing these new skills through, and is that something that we would then need to think about or could think about in terms of where we identify as kind of growth areas?
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, this has really sparked my imagination, because obviously the skill shortage is an area that I've heard of but don't know nearly as well as either of you. But just speaking from a data perspective, one of the examples, really powerful examples of open data, is understanding where people are with certain skills. Now, wouldn't it be a great start if the construction industry, together with government and people themselves, could find out where the skills live? You were talking earlier about, the Holy Grail, that older, very skilled worker who has knowledge in his head which is going to be incredibly valuable, essential for the next generation. And maybe there are 6 or 7 of those down in a certain area of the country and absolutely none in another area. Wouldn't it be great then to be able to identify them, to reach out to them, to say, we would love 1 or 2 of you to come to this part of the country for a project, to pass on those skills, to capture those skills. And here we move away from our traditional conception of open data as just sort of numbers on a page towards more qualitative stuff. It could be short videos, techniques, preserving that sort of knowledge, and making sure that the next generation, which is now being trained up and is going to come in and have to sort of to fill that gap, has the skills and the knowledge. That doesn't mean you're starting from scratch. So open data can really help with finding out where these people are and what they know.
Yeah, and I think moving away from the competitive market issues of releasing private and sensitive data, and start engaging with people and understanding what people can do and what can't do. It's a fantastic engine for better integration and collaboration, and regardless which builder you work for, I'm very interested in what you've done. How many builders, how many techniques, what you're passionate about, what you really can't stand doing, and maybe there is a reason why you can't stand doing that particular job, because maybe it's not the best way of doing it. So engaging with the workforce, and find a way to talk to the entire UK construction workforce at once through a clever use of open data. Could be a fantastic source for change.
And definitely, and this speaks to a really important point about open data, which is that there's a perception that you need to protect data, that data is like gold or oil, that once you let it out there, it's gone, someone else has got the value. But data doesn't work like that. Releasing it in no way harms its value to you, because you still have the access to it. What it does is it potentially creates additional value for you or for the industry as a whole by sharing that information across different providers of construction all through the supply chain. It's possible to build greater value for the industry in terms of where the skills are and making sure they're properly met than you would ever have if everyone held on to their own data, and with no detriment. So all it really takes is for 1 or 2 companies to take the lead, to recognize the economic benefit that's out there, and also to rephrase the argument around open data away from just a social good. It is a social good. It absolutely has immense social power, but it's also an economic benefit for the person who's releasing it. So getting that data out there is not just a selfless action. It's not corporate social responsibility. It's also a competitive advantage. Getting people using your data, having a conversation around your information, is a commercial benefit.
And I understand that, there is a first step, which is almost a kind of brainstorming level. There's an interesting research, I suppose, to be done by simply mapping things out there. And then through the process of understanding what data is available, the idea may come. So if we could map skills in the UK construction sector and have a very simple, accessible mashup of who is where, we will be starting, realizing that there is a shortage or there is an abundance of a specific skill, or maybe there is not enough understanding or a specific technique. And I think that would be an interesting starting point. I think there is a shared interest in improving the output and the outcome of the industry. So each developer, each builder should, in their own interest, in their own commercial interest, release into data related to their skills.
Yeah, I can see, as you're talking now, I'm thinking, I can see a huge benefit for the supply chain as well. It might influence kind of, where they look to set up operations based on where the skill base is. which would then obviously have a kind of secondary benefit through to us because they would have, be delivering better products quicker, cheaper. So down the chain as well, I can see benefit.
Absolutely, definitely. And this, a good example of this from Citadel, from government, is business rates data. Right now, the government holds data on how much you have to charge in business rates. And up until recently, this was all held very closely because it was considered valuable, something you should protect. But our clients in Leeds realised that they were actually getting their most freedom of information requests were coming on this business rates data set because lawyers working on behalf of companies in the city always querying the business rates, which meant they had to spend staff time and money. Now, by opening up this data set, they cut freedom of information requests by around 4% in a single year, which is a big saving when you think that a single request can cost sometimes upwards of £5,000 to service. So what may have appeared a short-term benefit to the government of holding on to this data actually turned into a long-term benefit of releasing it. And the same is true in the construction industry with information about skills. If you can build up information about skills, you start, driving the skills market, disseminating those really valuable techniques that make those gang leaders so valuable to the industry. And in, maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years, you're going to see more people with those skills, which means more affordable labour and more affordable houses ultimately, which is economic benefit to the provider.
And starting by celebrating people, through open data is also a first tangible step towards, filling the skills gap. So, if somebody still uncertain about joining or not the construction industry could learn from a very successful story of someone being on site for 40 years and just knowing everything about their specific trade, could be a very inspiring, piece of information to share. I suppose the example of opening up data related to business rates is quite useful for us to talk about another fundamental keyword in the open data discussion, which is transparency. And I think with transparency, I would like to tackle the 4th chapter of our housing mini guide, which is engagement with community. There is a lot of misconception about what a developer does, and how much it gains from their operations. But I'm an architect and I work with developers, and sometimes you surprise yourself by seeing how sensible everything is. This is the cost of land, which in the UK is fantastic, is incredibly high compared to other places in the EU zones, and everything kind of makes sense. So that we could break barriers by being more transparent, because at the end of the day we all follow rules of the market to a certain extent, and the more we enable transparency to improve our communication, the easier it will be for business to grow. So could you see a potential for talking to your community, talking to your customer, engaging in a more transparent and ongoing way?
I think we consider ourselves a transparent organisation. As it stands, your example there on land value is, whenever we're in kind of discussions with landowners, with local authorities, it's all open book. We're completely honest with the numbers, and which ultimately feeds into what that land value is. In terms of kind of when it comes to communities, I think as you say, kind of there is a bit of a misconception around what developers do and then their motives and that sort of things. But it's our genuine intention to kind of to enhance communities and to the sites that we do bring to the table to deliver well-designed great places. The term great places. We use a metric called Building for Life, which is an assessment of design quality, which we we aspire to on every site that we build. So transparency with the community would never be a problem for us. By them understanding what we're about to a greater extent, I can only see benefit in doing so.
And yeah, this comes back to the idea of starting a conversation around data, if you could somehow better communicate through open data the sort of how you go about acquiring land, the fact that you're providing a social good with this housing, that this is something that people really need in this area, and that you're really providing a good for that local community. That goes a long way, I think, to changing perceptions of developers and the construction industry in the local community. And likewise, getting their views on how they see a development, how they see the future of their local area, gives you a sort of a valuable way to be open and to communicate the right messages, the things that really connect with local people and make the process simpler, easier and more transparent.
I think in a nutshell, one way I would try to summarize the opportunity for the construction industry is to realize that we not only produce goods, but we also produce public good. And in this, simple slogan, we can actually harness quite a bit of what we discussed. If the construction industry, UK-wide, understand the relevance of a social value policy, then we all kind of, yes, we do agree. We all want to work towards that change. So enabling better transparency, better communication with communities, has commercial value for a housing developer. Understanding how energy is used in a community actually has potential value for the customer, which therefore wants to engage with specific developer able to communicate that part of data. Enabling a better and transparent monitoring of crime or happiness. They do all build the social value that eventually we want to create.
And they drive something which I think is quite important for open data, which is, well, we call it citizen centricity, or being focused on the person. And in the construction industry, the more information you can gather, the more you can make projects focused on ultimately the people who are going to buy and live in those homes. The more you know about them, their local area, the easier it is to construct projects which match their needs and which make for happier, better developments and also drive your commercial benefit in the future.
I love the idea of happiness indices of every one of our customers, and looking to map that and see, where it's high, what are the reasons why it's high, where it's maybe not quite so high, what's going on, because obviously we do use these metrics, like I say, building for life. But yeah, the happiness index of our customers, we're on board.
And also, that might be something as simple as getting your customers to engage with you over a longer time frame once they bought the house, about how they feel living in the house, so that a house is making someone feel particularly good when they're in these kind of rooms, or great when they're walking around this aspect of the outside. Just getting people to give you that kind of feedback, which becomes open data, gives everyone a better idea of how to build houses that make people happy, which is ultimately the way to sell more houses.
So, talking to a large established UK housing developer, the question is there an opportunity for open data to improve our work?
I think there is. I think this has been a learning experience for me, so I thank you both for that. I can see value in it 100% on all the streams that we've kind of discussed. I think that the happiness index is going to stay with me. That's one I want to take away and have a think about. But the point around planning, as I say, that is a kind of it can be a real crux for us. There is such a level of risk involved in taking sites through the planning process, and anything that can kind of assist with that is really worthwhile, in my opinion.
Fantastic. So hopefully a conversation has started today, and it should continue.
Yeah, absolutely.
Definitely.
Well, Stephen, Ben, thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thanks.